Why did the coffee file a police report?
I don't know why.
It got mugged. Oh, what a show we've got today, folks. Welcome back to Brand Coverage. I'm Brandon Carney alongside Pat Gustafson, and
I wish I'd get mugged now.
Shit popped off today, Pat. There's really no other way to put it. I had to Google when is the NFL trade deadline because it felt like it was fucking today.
Just to make sure it wasn't today, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I knew it wasn't today, but at the same time, like, it was very odd, all these deals ripping at the same time. I mean, in fairness,
Did we miss the one that just happened? Cam Akers back to the Vikings, yeah.
I don't have it in the show sheet, but I mean, we'll get to it. Yeah, I don't know. The Vikings just couldn't live without Cam Akers, I guess. But like, yeah, the first deal I remember seeing wasn't, really fantasy relevant. It was Roy Robertson Harris going from the Seahawks to, I believe, the Lions. And then, this Davante trade has been marinating for a little bit. That one wasn't necessarily a surprise to see come through. And then Amari Cooper got traded to the Bills. And then Cam Akers got traded to the Vikings in what was, it has to be the biggest deal out of all four of them. That's definitely the most high-profile one. But, folks, on today's show, we will be reacting to all of those trades and what it means for both fantasy football and real life. We'll be going over Drake May's day. I pressed the enter, and I had my finger over it. Well, enjoy that little
See, I thought that was my YouTube that just popped. Like, what the fuck?
Enjoy that extra snippet of the song. Drake May's debut, and then more reactions to Week 6. Professional podcaster over here. But, Pat, we've got plenty of news, so let's not waste any time. Let's get into it.
Good evening. I'm Ron Burgundy, and this is what's happening in your world tonight.
All right, so this saga, we had the Bran and Ayuk saga, Pat, and then we moved on to the Davante Adams saga. The Davante Adams saga is finally over, and Pat, as our resident Raider fan, is very depressed here. Pat, I'll play this for you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask for the sad music.
So, what was your reaction, Pat? Finally saw Davante Adams out of Las Vegas and heading to New York.
Well, when we first talked about this like a fucking month ago, I said it was the obvious decision to make, but then all of a sudden you've got these Adam Schefter reports from yesterday? Or the day before saying that he might stay. And it just kind of, didn't get my hopes up. I'm just sort of like, nobody would give them what they wanted. So it caught me off guard this morning, obviously. But they had to do it. They are, I believe my dad and I just termed them as rudderless. They are going absolutely nowhere. And there is no need for them to have someone like Davante Adams who is, not going to be part of their future and can possibly net them an asset coming back. But it's more so just an indictment of a franchise that does stupid things, doing stupid things in general by getting the college roommate of the guy that you're going to inevitably release in 2 years and not have a backup plan for that. And then let your running back walk and not have a backup plan for that. And now trade the roommate and have no backup plan. So they are, but here's the thing. They are going to win 6 or 7 games. Just enough to not have a good draft pick. I have never been more sure of something. Not that I'm confident this team is any good, but they will win games that they are not supposed to win because of course they fucking will. And then it'll be all rah, Antonio Pierce leader. Oh, this is shit. No. Lose as many fucking games as you possibly can. There is no need to win a single game the rest of the year. Even though there's not a, quote, sure thing quarterback at the top like Caleb last year. Anything can be better than Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell. And before we move on, I just want to show you guys this. This is my Raiders jersey collection here. This is Darren Waller. I don't know what happened to him.
Yeah.
Yup. Here's Derek Carr.
Oh, yeah.
And last but certainly not least, Davante Adams. So I'm just going to stop buying those altogether. Even Crosby, I'm scared. I know. I can't curse him. I can't curse him.
Lion. Yeah, I would be worried about him as well. Yeah, look, my first reaction when I saw this go through, and Pat, you mentioned, Schefter saying, oh, it might not happen, he might end up staying. I saw a really poignant, response to that, which was basically just, this means they're not getting offered enough. Like, they still fully intend to trade Davante Adams, and it was just, hey, guys, offer us more. And the Jets were finally willing to cop to it. Not a surprise after, what happened Monday night. Not that was, they only lost the game by 3 to the division favorite, but the Jets are supposed to and trying to be the division favorite. So they can't be having games like that, especially games where, that quite honestly, that game wasn't as close as the scoreboard suggested. Because the Hail Mary is a Hail Mary. You're not chalking that up to good execution on the part of the Jets. So the Jets felt like they had to do something. To me, it's both a desperation move, but also a move that makes them legitimately better. This is the time to be desperate, so I get it. And the Raiders, to their credit, they got a 3rd round pick that can turn into a 2nd based on performance. So that's not bad. Yeah. That's essentially what they traded. 2 seconds for Davante, so they got a 2nd back for him. So, they recouped a decent chunk of value, and the Jets are going to pay the rest of Davante's salary. So, look, as far as, there's a lot to break down here from a fantasy perspective, right? You've got Davante Adams, you've got Garrett Wilson's outlook, you've got Brock Bowers. I think we can start from a Davante Adams perspective. It's to me, it's as easy as this is probably going to be lower volume than Vegas slightly, but with much higher quality. And I'm not even confident in saying that it's going to be lower volume, because if you look at what Davante did, at least this year in the first 3 games, it wasn't incredibly high volume anyway. You're looking at 6 targets, then 12 targets, then 9 targets.
Gotta stop you. Get this fucking kid out of here. We got a spammer anyway. We're getting quick.
Listen,
Pat, the part-time mod.
Yeah, I know. I need to just give you the power to do that. I think Davante, the volume wasn't necessarily there, and I'm not going to rule out the possibility that Rodgers just makes sure, his buddy gets the volume and averages, 9 targets a game or so, despite Garrett Wilson being in the picture. This is a case where Rodgers has not been shy about prioritizing his guys. Allen Lazard has been far more fantasy relevant thus far than any of us expected. And I think, Davante Adams is going to kind of fall into that same plane, just on a much higher level. This might push Lazard out of relevance, or it could push Garrett Wilson out of relevance. No, I don't think that's going to happen. But that would be something. That would be peak Rodgers. But as far as Davante, I think if you're a Davante owner, you're pretty happy, and I think this is probably an upgrade over playing the entire season in Vegas, even though there's more competition. But the chemistry and the quarterback play is just so much better.
We've literally seen Aaron Rodgers just pellet Allen Lazard, and they brought Randall Cobb in because they wanted. If Rodgers likes one of his guys, he's going to throw to him. And it was interesting. The one thing, I just saw a report, I forget who it was, not long ago, saying that Rodgers pushed for it. You cannot tell me he had nothing to do with Robert Saleh getting fired. You cannot convince me that he was not behind that. Yeah. It is clear that man has Woody Johnson by his Woody Johnson. And he is pulling the strings. You can't... this was a good move. Now, obviously, you go get Davante Adams if you could go get Davante Adams, but there is just no doubt in my mind who's running the show.
Yeah. Look, when you trade for Aaron Rodgers, that's kind of the responsibility that you accept, or I guess the structure that you accept is that, look, Rodgers is going to be calling the shots. And when Rodgers has been historically, maybe it's generous to call him a winner because he didn't exactly win a ton big picture in Green Bay. He always made the playoffs, but that is still further than the Jets have gotten, ever since Mark Sanchez was in uniform. So I understand it. I definitely think he had plenty to do with basically every move the Jets have made here in the last few weeks. But Pat, that's Davante Adams. We went over him. Now, Garrett Wilson. This is the one that I think most people are wondering, because this is the guy that, was selected very early in fantasy drafts with the idea that he could be Aaron Rodgers' new Davante Adams. I think we've started to see, even if it's not necessarily the chemistry fully coming together the last few weeks, at the very least the targets and thus the fantasy points have been coming together. This has been a really nice 2-week stretch for Garrett Wilson. And now it's right as things seem like they might be catching a little fire, it's really getting watered down here by adding just another absolute alpha. So my opinion on it, and I've expressed it on the show before by, when we entertain the possibility of Davante Adams coming to New York, is this is not an upgrade for Garrett Wilson, as much as people may want to spin it that way because it'll open up the field, blah, blah, blah. I get that. I think Davante coming in will It's not going to be, this is not a death sentence for Garrett Wilson, and I don't think necessarily his fantasy point totals will drop off a ton. To me, this is just like a slight downgrade, and you're going to keep starting him anyway. But to me, at least for now, I view Garrett Wilson as like, whereas before he was probably a low-end wide receiver 1, I think probably high-end wide receiver 2 now, and you're still going to be starting that every week. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I think it just really caps any ceiling. I mean, we saw what a potential ceiling was when he got fucking 22 targets, but obviously, again, context matters, and the context is that Aaron Rodgers threw the ball 54 times that game. But yeah, you're still starting Garrett Wilson. Unless you are really loaded at wide receiver and you can afford not to, you're going to. But yeah, you kind of just have to realize that he probably was going off the board as like the wide receiver 8 or 9, I think, in the preseason. You're probably not going to get that. But I don't think it's going to be so bad to the point where you're looking back and saying that was the pick that cost you your season.
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, just taking a look at Garrett Wilson's fantasy point totals in half PPR so far this year. Look, the first 4 weeks, 9, 8.2, 11.8, and 4.6. That's pretty disastrous. And then the last 2 weeks, 22.6 and 20.7, and I think most notably to me, Pat, those were against good defenses. Those were against the Vikings defense and the Bills defense. So it was not only, a bit of certainly more than a bit of an improvement for Garrett Wilson, but it was happening against quality competition. And now it's crazy what these early season performances can do. I remember talking like he was, I think, wide receiver like 30 something when we were going over like early performances. He's already up to wide receiver 9 just based on those last 2 games. But I do think that is going to dip. You're probably looking at a season finish of like wide receiver 14, 15, which, look, it is what it is, but this is not a death sentence for Garrett Wilson. And then just looking at who's left in Las Vegas, Pat, Brock Bowers is just going to keep being a monster. I think that is what it is. Yeah. He is as likely to be the tight end 1 overall at the end of the season as I think, our back from the dead Travis Kelce and George Kittle and Trey McBride. I think it's really kind of a 4-horse race right now between those guys. But honestly, if I had to put my money on one guy, and it's a tough bet to make, I think I'd put it on Bowers just because he's the only guy here now. And at the tight end position, that's not a position that like you're not going to go in and face a team's number 1 corner. Like that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
So, I think if I could pick any tight end out of those top 4 to have for the rest of the season, I'd probably take McBride first just because he's a little bit more proven. But then after that, I'm probably taking Bowers just because we've seen the up and down historically from Kittle, even though this year he's been fantastic. And then we've seen... I know. And then we've seen, Kelce historically as well, but he showed that decline early in the year. To me, give me the young guy that's going to just have the insane volume. Bowers is probably my tight end 2 or possibly tight end 1 for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could argue that Kelce has a similar lack of competition, but I guess the ghost of Juju Smith-Schuster made an appearance, but... Yeah, and they have no reason not to throw it to him. It's not like they have any like young wide receivers that they're also trying to really incorporate in the long run. I mean, I guess maybe Trey Tucker, but we saw what he did last week on a ton of snaps. Like it wasn't like he wasn't out there. He didn't do a thing. And there's no reason why, especially with how shitty their running game is. I mean, even though it's looked a little better, there's no reason the ball should not be going to Brock Bowers at any possible opportunity. Anytime he looks open or not,
Yeah, no, I think we're in for quite a rest of the season from Brock Bowers. Definitely an all-time great rookie tight end fantasy season, which seems like, honestly, Pat, it's funny. We're saying this for like 3 straight years now because, for the longest time it was rookie tight ends can't be trusted. And I think big picture, that's probably still true. But now you look at the last few years, Bowers, Laporta, and then back in the day, Kyle Pitts, like all as rookie tight ends were all just absolute monsters. It's like, I don't know if this is just because of the progression of the pass game overall or the evolution of the tight end position across the league, but I think it's a bit of a maybe archaic take at this point to say that rookie tight ends can't produce because we've seen it now for several straight years. All right. Another massive trade came down the pipe today. This one, I think, a little less expected, but we were still, we heard some buzz, right, about Amari Cooper possibly getting moved. We heard the Chiefs would be interested naturally with their receiver struggles after Rashee Rice went down. But it was another receiver-needy team that decided after Monday Night Football that they needed somebody to help them as well. The Buffalo Bills have acquired Amari Cooper. I think this is massive for the Bills. I really do.
I think it's massive for everyone involved, yeah.
They have nobody else there that was doing anything on a consistent basis. Look, Keon Coleman, not writing him off, but he's just not there right now. Khalil Shakir's been fine as a possession receiver. The tight ends, as a Dalton Kincaid owner, him and Knox have both just been fine. But they definitely lacked that one weapon that defenses are going to go into a game and be afraid of. And I think Amari Cooper, even though this isn't peak prime Amari Cooper that we're talking about, this is still a guy that, like, defensive coordinators are thinking about this guy first and foremost when you're figuring out how to defend the Bills once he gets fully immersed into this offense. But this is massive. I think if you're a Josh Allen fantasy owner, you are thrilled. If you're an Amari Cooper fantasy owner, you are thrilled because he's not dead anymore. Just a massive upgrade all around.
And I'd almost argue that Buffalo was even a better landing spot than Kansas City in terms of fantasy value for Amari Cooper, because you look in Kansas City, he's the alpha wide receiver, but Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have just made it abundantly clear that they do not care, and they can run their offense without one. Buffalo, this is a team where we've seen Josh Allen take a massive leap with Stephon Diggs. And now with Stephon Diggs not being here, that offense is still very good, but it's very different. Yeah. So we've seen that this is an offense where Josh Allen is absolutely not afraid to lean on an alpha-type wide receiver. And Amari Cooper is a guy that is probably not going to bring as much noise as someone like Stephon Diggs might. So I think if you're an Amari Cooper owner, this is the best day of your life. Honestly, This guy is... The Browns was just a shithole, and he was on the flex radar. You never felt good about starting him, but you could, I guess. But now he's a lock. He's a lineup lock, I think.
Yeah, I mean, he very well might be. I mean, he also might not be for now, just because so many teams that have Amari Cooper have probably just built in, new contingency plans because he hasn't really been startable. So maybe you've acquired some good receivers off the waiver wire or through trade that now Amari Cooper, even on the Bills, is a bit further down your priority list of your fantasy team. But I think he will probably prove himself to be starter worthy sooner rather than later. If you have the other options, I'm certainly not throwing him out there this week if I can help it.
Sure.
Just because you want a guy to get some time to adjust to an offense and get comfortable. But down the stretch of the season, I think this can be a weapon that definitely pays off. As far as the rest of the Bills' weapons, again, there's not really much to downgrade because they weren't doing a lot anyway. Even as a Dalton Kincaid owner, I'm not viewing this as some big downgrade for him because he's been so underwhelming that I almost want somebody that can, make him, I don't know, maybe take the pressure off of him or something. It's kind of the Garrett Wilson argument, but reverse and a lot lower stakes. I just, he wasn't doing much anyway. So to me, it's this is maybe just a lateral move, if not a slight improvement for a tight end as a complementary piece. And then the receivers, you weren't confidently starting Keon Coleman or Khalil Shakir anyway. So no. I think this is nothing but a positive for the Bills and for Josh Allen. And we've
now seen, no matter who is in the backfield, they have looked great on the ground. Both James Cook and then Ray Davis looked phenomenal. So we know that, it's going to be a pretty balanced attack. But in terms of Kincaid, he's been, like you said, he's been fine. And I think he's just going to be that, fine. But again, with how volatile the tight end position is, you could do so much worse than having Dalton Kincaid right now.
Yeah, well, I was panicking, at halftime of that game, thinking, I got to find me a new tight end. I can't. And mainly after the Dawson Knox touchdown, because I was like, dude, this is just not to overreact to one moment, but that was kind of just the straw that broke the camel's back of, okay, Dalton Kincaid has barely been startable, and now Dawson Knox is getting this, this touchdown just on to top things off.
And is that why you want the hawk?
Kinda. All that to say, though, by the end of the game, Dalton Kincaid had his second best game of the season. 6 catches for 51 yards on 7 targets. You're really not going to be upset with that in this tight end landscape. I just need the guy to find the end zone. Sometimes that would be my preference. So I'm still kind of looking for other options there, but at the end of the day, he ended up doing fine. All right, Pat, let's move here because this is more newsy than Drake May's debut, which we'll get to in a second. But the Steelers apparently are planning to start Russell Wilson. They are giving him first-team reps this week. Mike Tomlin has notably not been committed to calling Justin Fields a starter, and now it seems like they are teeing up Russell Wilson to start for them. How do you feel about this move, Pat? Because I'm not sure if this is the right move for the Steelers, because it feels like this look, their offense hasn't been great thus far. I get that. But to me, Justin Fields gives them a little bit of a dynamic that they just will not have with Russell Wilson. I don't see this as the right move for Pittsburgh.
Because, they're 4-2, right?
I believe so, yes.
So, it's not like they're not, say they had lost this week to the Raiders some fucking how. But, if they were not winning games, you could see Mike Tomlin's point in saying that, yeah, Justin Fields may be doing this, but he's not winning games. But he is, and like you said, he provides something that Russ doesn't in just, his athleticism, his ability to run. But maybe that they brought in Russ for a reason first. Before Justin Fields, where he was the guy. And I'm sure that was Mike Tomlin's mindset, and that mindset probably hasn't changed. And admittedly, Justin Fields hasn't played that great to fully take the job. But like you said, you could tell when Mike Tomlin didn't want to fully commit to Justin Fields that it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't necessarily a sure thing. And this just sucks from a fantasy perspective if you got Justin Fields. I've got Justin Fields in a league. He was free. He was most likely undrafted, and he was more than a reliable, hardly even a streamer. In the league I had him, I've had him in the last 3 or 4 weeks. He's just been solid like that. And Russ, you're not starting Russ. But then the question just becomes, how much is Russ going to, be better as more of a pocket passer to support guys like George Pickens and Pat Freiermuth?
Yeah, I think that's the crazy part of this with Justin Fields, right? Is I think a lot of fantasy teams out there, Pat, there's one in our league, and I've seen a lot of people saying this throughout, is Justin Fields is their only quarterback because he's been good, and you haven't needed to spend that roster spot on another guy. Granted, maybe you should have been this whole time just because this lack of job security has kind of been hinted at. But from a production standpoint, you haven't really needed to think about a quarterback for the last few weeks if you've had Justin Fields on your team. Now, these teams are a little bit blindsided, and it's what were you going to say?
I almost just quoted a guy, but then I realized he's very relevant in this situation. I was going to say that one former head coach saying that they're not playing fantasy football, but then I remembered that he's the fucking offensive coordinator there now. But it's true, obviously from the fantasy lens, you're like, what are they doing? And then from the real life lens, it's still questionable, but far less questionable than just from fantasy. So I've got him in a league where I've got Anthony Richardson, so I'm probably just going to drink cyanide after this instead. Then
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because, look, the Steelers are 20th in the NFL in points per game, which, given their offensive personnel and given how their defense controls games and keeps the pace down, I don't feel like 20th in the league is bad for them. They are probably looking at it like we want to be better than that, but I'm I don't know if Russell Wilson gets you there. Is Russ the
guy?
So,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you project forward now and you see, you think about the possibilities. I don't know what, are they going to go back to Fields if Russ struggles? How long did they give Russ? This just feels like a weird move when, not that the Steelers were rolling, but they're 4-2. They have wins over teams like the Falcons, the Chargers, even the Broncos, who have a really good defense and have stymied teams. They managed to pull out a win there. I think I would have liked to see what Justin Fields could do in these next few games, specifically you've got the Jets this week, and then you've got the Giants and the Commanders. There's a chance you can win all 3 of those games and not kind of rock the boat here by changing the starter. It's a little bit weird to me. But looking at it from the lens of the other weapons on the Steelers, Pat, you mentioned George Pickens, you mentioned Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth. I don't think this changes anything for me for George Pickens or Pat Freiermuth, really. No. I think those guys have both proven to be inconsistent pass-catching options. For Freiermuth, that's by virtue of the offense and the constant rotation of tight ends. And for Pickens, it's that the offense being odd because Arthur Smith doesn't play him a ton of snaps, but also George Pickens has attitude problems, and they are not manifesting themselves into consistent fantasy production because they are basically saying, look, if you're not going to try on the routes you're not targeted, you're not going to be out there as much as you'd like to be. So I don't think you're not starting George Pickens. You're not confidently starting Pat Freiermuth, but again, tight ends, maybe you are. He's
especially
startable.
With bye weeks too.
I think the biggest beneficiaries here are the running backs, and I believe Jaylen Warren is also getting healthier. But to me, this was the biggest note, and this was one that I dug up. And there's context you got to apply with different coordinators and such. But last year with the Broncos, Broncos running backs saw 8.8 targets per game with Russell Wilson under center. This year, Steelers running backs are seeing 5.7 targets per game. So you're talking about, like a 60 to 70% increase in target possibilities for these running backs because Russell Wilson is more likely to check it down than Justin Fields is, obviously, because Fields would rather just take off himself when the play gets to that point. So I think, Najee Harris has already been good, and Jaylen Warren we're hoping could kind of salvage this campaign that's been marred by injury so far. I think if Russell Wilson ends up the long-term starter, both guys are in pretty good shape to do that.
Yeah, that was, why I did a bit of a positive turn on Najee Harris shortly before the year, was that Russ loves to check the ball down so much. And even though it was a Sean Payton offense where obviously he had Drew Brees, who was the king of the slant and the king of the check down, but still, Russ is at this point where he's not nearly as mobile in the pocket as he once was. So, he's probably going to have to do that. And Najee is proven to not be an incapable pass catcher. He's not like Jaylen Warren. I guess for Warren's perspective, I kind of see him as, an elite handcuff. If something were to happen to Najee Harris, he's getting a lot of work. But unfortunately, I feel like he's basically on the wrong side of a platoon where you're probably not going to be able to start him. Outside of a desperation play with Najee Harris still in the lineup. And, maybe they'll get a touchdown. Najee Harris literally had to sacrifice his body to score a rush. And that was his first touchdown of the year, because anytime they get within the goal line, it's hey, how about me getting a turn? And then it's the video of the pit bull who won't give up the watermelon.
Yeah.
That's Justin Fields. So, yeah, obviously, again, the ceiling isn't crazy for Najee Harris, but he's been startable, and I think that'll get better.
Yeah, I agree. So Steelers certainly changing some things up for better or for worse for fantasy. We will find out. One thing that's definitely better for fantasy, Pat, is Drake May's debut for the New England Patriots. I would say from a fantasy perspective and mostly from a real life perspective, there wasn't much more you could ask for a debut for Drake May.
Yeah.
He was fantastic statistically. There were some plays that, head scratching. He had 2 interceptions and a fumble loss. Rookie things against a good defense, one of the most pressuring defenses in the NFL. But Drake May threw for the most passing yards that the Texans have allowed all season. Drake May went 20 for 33, 243 yards, 3 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Also added 38 yards on 5 carries on the ground, which is exactly what we've talked about with Drake May and what we've wanted to see. Believe he tallied just over 19 fantasy points, so more than startable already against a good defense. This is really good news all around for me as well, just for the watchability of the Patriots. I'm excited now to watch him going forward, even with a bad O-line. The O-line was mostly okay. I mean, there were certainly some plays where guys got through a little faster than you'd like, but look, every team has those plays. It wasn't a complete disaster, but looking at just the overall implications across, the Patriots roster, I think Demario Douglas, Pop Douglas, it appears to be is going to be did pop off. Appears to be Drake May's favorite target, at least out the gate. Which, I'll be honest, Pat, I kept seeing this narrative posted kind of around Reddit and social media, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to fully buy into it. But it was Demario Douglas is the most similar to Josh Downs out of the players on the Patriots receiving corps, and Josh Downs was Drake May's favorite target in college. Demario Douglas has also worked out with Josh Downs this offseason. Same guys, or same size guys, short dudes, intermediate part of the field, just going to kind of dice you up. And that materialized in Drake May's first start. I wasn't sure if it would because honestly, I went into the game thinking, Jalen Polk's going to be our wide receiver 1. He's the guy that's getting all these great separation scores. He's the guy we spent higher draft capital on, even though it was just this past draft. So, he's still a rookie, still learning. But it seems like, I don't think it's jumping to conclusions to say Demario Douglas will probably outproduce Jalen Polk for the rest of the season, provided health and all that, because he was heavily targeted by Drake May. We're looking at 9 targets, 6 catches for 92 yards and a touchdown. And, now he's about to face a porous Jacksonville D. I think you can happily start Demario Douglas in your flex spot this week.
Yeah, and I believe he even was getting heavily targeted with Brissett. I think I heard something like 3 of the last 4 games he had 9 or more targets. So
2 of the last
it's
3,
not just a Drake May thing. It's also a system thing. It's also an Alex Van Pelt thing that they want to get this guy involved. So if they're working to get him more involved and the QB's got him as his favorite target, that's the perfect combination here. And with Jacoby Brissett, there just wasn't enough passing volume, really, for you to be confident about starting a Patriot, I guess outside of Hunter Henry, but even then, that wasn't a sure thing either. But, yeah, I think Douglas is definitely the guy you want here in this offense. This will help the running game as well. We've seen Ramondre Stevenson, hopefully he'll be healthy. We've seen him do well in certain games, even with it, so that could obviously boost the running game as well. And the Yankees are winning.
Hell yeah, go Yankees. Yeah, look, you don't want to, take too much away from this one game, but it's like if Drake Maye is going to be passing around almost 250 passing yards or, more going forward against some more forgiving defenses and 3 touchdowns, there's going to be possibly multiple guys in this offense that become fantasy relevant for you. Obviously, Demario Douglas is the one. Polk is kind of on the afterburner for now just because not only was he not heavily targeted in that game, but he did not look good. He had some really bad drops. Gerard Mayo even came out and said, he's got to get over that mental hump, which, yeah, from somebody who watched that whole game, he did not look like an alpha receiver. Now, this is the kind of guy that switch can get flipped anytime, but, we have to see when and if that might happen. I think the more notable thing on the receiver front, other than Jalen Polk being underwhelming, was Jalen Polk did not play the most snaps out of Patriots receivers. Kayshon Boutte came out of nowhere to play 83% of the snaps, the most among Patriots receivers, and turn that into a 3-catch, 59-yard, and 1 touchdown line. It was only on 3 targets, and it was a 40-yard touchdown, so he basically made his day off of one big play. But if this is going to become a consistent thing, I'm not going to advocate for you to pick up Kayshon Boutte in your fantasy leagues because I don't think people are really going to be jumping all over him just because of this one game. But he's a guy, you got to keep an eye on him because if he keeps that kind of snap percentage up this upcoming week and, again, has a quarterback that's willing and able to throw the ball downfield, he becomes a little more interesting. You'd like to see more than 3 targets because right now we're dealing with kind of an Alec Pierce situation, and I have refused to advocate for him all year, and I'll keep that trend with this archetype of player. But again, we're looking, Drake Maye is going to need some help from guys outside of Demario Douglas. And at least in that game, Kayshon Boutte was one of the only ones willing to help him out alongside Hunter Henry, who I think is back on the tight end streaming radar just because, Hunter Henry's not a guy that's generally going to rack up a ton of yardage for you. I know he had 90 yards in week 2 or something ridiculous on a bajillion targets, but he's a guy that they're going to look for in the red zone, and the Patriots are going to be in the red zone more now with Drake Maye. I feel comfortable saying that. Look, Drake Maye is already raising the floor, I think, of every Patriots weapon, and we'll have to wait and see which ones become fantasy relevant. But for now, Pop Douglas gets an A+. Polk, wait and see. Kayshon Boutte, keep an eye on it. And Hunter Henry, if you're desperate at tight end, I think you could do worse, especially against this bad Jags defense in London this week. And then Drake Maye himself can absolutely be useful if you need a quarterback. I do want to note this. I still think the Patriots are targetable for opposing defense special team units in fantasy. I'm not going to go crazy and be like, oh, the Patriots offense is going to be awesome the rest of the year. Again, for all the flashes Drake Maye showed, he also had 3 turnovers, some of which, if they got a different bounce, could have easily been housed, and you're getting that all too valuable touchdown from your DST. And he was also sacked 4 times. The O-line is not going to be good overall in terms of they're still going to give up sacks, even if they maybe hold up like they did in this game on a down-to-down basis, because Drake Maye wasn't. It didn't feel like he was completely hands in his face every single play, but the sacks are still going to pop up there. So yeah, I think it's a 2 sides kind of thing with this Patriots offense, but I'm at the very least excited about it and very optimistic as a Patriots fan. Pat, I threw this one in here because it has to be addressed. Is Mark Andrews back? Because Mark Andrews was personally very rude to me this week. I was going to lose anyway because my team has been decimated by injuries. But Mark Andrews, as I faced him this week, decided, you know what this would be a good time for? My first touchdown of the year, along with 3 catches for 66 yards on 4 targets. Now, this marks back-to-back weeks, no pun intended, of decent performances for Mark Andrews. 7.5 points last week, 14.1 this week. Again, both you kind of are okay with the tight end landscape the way it is. So the question is this him ramping up back into what Mark Andrews was in the past? Or is this a little bit of an anomaly because of the defenses they faced the past 2 weeks, which were the abysmal Bengals and Commanders defenses? I think it's a little bit more the latter. How are you feeling?
I was going to say, I think he might be ramping up, but I think we really need to hold on our expectations because the biggest thing is that he only played 50% of the snaps, which is, obviously not his season low, but he had played 55 the week before against the Bengals. So the fact of the matter is he's just not out there, which is so bizarre because that was Mark Andrews' whole thing, that he's always out there and, he was always available for Lamar to be this kind of security blanket, and that's how he racked up targets. And I guess he's just not really that big of a part of this offense, not a new offense, of this offense now. We've seen, I guess what's new about it is they have Derrick Henry, who they might as well give the ball to him every time. And Zay Flowers has been extremely involved as well. But again, with the tight end landscape, Mark Andrews is definitely back on the radar. Like, for example, the league I have Mark Andrews, I have Dalton Kincaid. I'm still starting Dalton Kincaid this week and beyond. But if he was out there for more, if he played 75% of the snaps this past week, I'd say this is great. But the lack of being on the field, I feel like we've got another big egg coming up right when everyone puts him in their lineups.
Yeah, so this is a great note from J.J. Zachariason. Mark Andrews ran a route on 60% of Baltimore's dropbacks in Week 6. That was his highest route participation since Week 2. Week 2 was also a 7.1 point outing, 4 catches for 51 yards. It just feels like that's kind of the ceiling at this point. Because, again, you mentioned the snaps. Like, while the fantasy output was better this week than last, where, last week was like, Mark Andrews has a pulse. He had 55 yards on a few catches. And then this week, he got in the end zone on top of, even more yards. That he actually dropped in snap percentage from last week to this week. He went from, where's the number? 55% to 50%. So, this is just kind of a thing where it doesn't seem like he's really, quote unquote, progressing in anything other than, fantasy points over the last 2 weeks. He had decent and then better. But everything else is kind of pointing toward this is just going to be a game to game thing where he might play more in one game than another one. And it's just going to be a nightmare to try to predict.
Which makes it a nightmare for Isaiah Likely too, because he's either been super involved or non-existent. One of my friends you told me not to start Likely, and he had 2 touchdowns. I'm like, bro, he averaged 2 points the first 2 weeks before. Right. Of course I was going to tell you to not play him.
Yeah, you're like, I don't have a crystal ball. It's going to be a guy that is going to benefit just from this Ravens offense being an absolute just monster beast right now that can't be stopped. And sometimes you're going to get a little piece of that because, guys, the defenses maybe just aren't paying as much attention to you as they once would. So, look, I don't think this is some sort of major breakout for Mark Andrews, but at the very least he is becoming a bit more startable again. And in this landscape, that is kind of all you can ask for. This came out a few days ago. Tua Tagovailoa is officially expected back, according to Mike McDaniel. No specific date. So McDaniel confirmed Tua is expected to play again in 2024. Doesn't have an exact date, but Tua is eligible to return Week 8. I did not, and look, I have plenty of stake in the Dolphins offense because all my Davante shares depend on Tua coming back and making this offense competent again. I did not interpret, McDaniel having no exact date as Week 8 being ruled out because Tua had to miss this week anyway, this upcoming week, Week 7, because this is still part of the 4-week minimum you have to spend when you are placed on IR. And so there's no reason to really say he's going to be back right when it's up. You can really play this out for as long as you want to, just to not give anything away and also give Tua as much time as he needs to, be positive that this is the decision he wants to make. But all the other reports have been, Tua's symptom-free. He's felt good for weeks now. I think there's no reason that he wouldn't be back the first week he's eligible. Obviously, we'll have to wait and see, but that's kind of where I'm at. I'm still expecting Tua to be back Week 8 when he's first eligible.
Yeah, and that would be huge, like you said, really it's just Davante and Tyreek Hill. I guess Jalen Waddle as well, but he has been such an afterthought, and
he would at least be a good flex start if Tua is healthy. I mean,
you think he's at least back to being relevant. He's irrelevant right now, but you spent a lot of capital on Tyreek Hill. You spent a lot of capital on Davante, and like we kind of talked about in the couple weeks after he went out, that you could clearly see that this offense was tailored for him. You can say what you will about Tua in terms of how good is he actually in the grand scheme of things. Does he deserve his contract? And, that could be well debated. But what you can't debate is that Mike McDaniel fit this offense to fit his skill set. and it has suffered tremendously without him. So, you know, in an ideal world, they can go back to being what we thought they were going to be in one of the more dependable offenses, where we thought like, wow, Achane and Raheem Mostert could both have value. Tyreek is the wide receiver 1 overall, and Jalen Waddle. You've gotta just at least hold out hope, because what a disaster. Like, have we seen like a whole offense? Like, we've seen guys go way up top and do miserably. But have we seen like a whole team be like kind of touted as one of like the top 4 or 5 fantasy offenses that has just been a waste? Like, they are one of the worst right now, I'd say. But it's worse because you have to start Tyreek Hill. Because if you don't, then you're going to kick yourself.
Yeah, it's such a specific type of offense that like it's kind of bound to fall apart when you don't have a backup that can operate it, because they're so based on timing and these quick routes and all that, you know, that's a lot to ask any backup to come in and be able to execute and be confident in. So I think, like, you know, again, Tua's earned a little bit more of my respect just because he's able to operate this offense. But at the same time, you know, it is a surprise that it has tapered off so much. I am just dying for him to get back for Davante because he was so much fun the first 2 weeks. And right now it's like, you know, obviously he's going through concussion protocol himself, and we'll get into the other injuries in a little bit. But like, he's a guy that I'm going to start this week because I have no other options, but I'm not excited about it because I could very easily see another 5-point outing because Tyler Huntley is just not going to get this offense moving the way it needs to move. Yeah. But as of right now, Tua, I'm expecting him back week 8, especially because the Dolphins have not gone after another quarterback. Like, I think you would have seen more of a not a panic move, but a more solid move if they were suspecting they were going to be without Tua long term, because the Dolphins are not out of contention. The Dolphins are 2-3. If they get Tua back after this week, and look, they could very easily win this week even with Huntley because they're facing the Colts. God knows what they're going to look like with Anthony Richardson back under center, which is expected. They're not going to, if they were giving up on the they have no reason to give up on the season. So I think they're expecting Tua back. If they weren't expecting him back, they would have probably gone after a guy like Tannehill who could maybe run some semblance of this offense. And they didn't do that, and they especially didn't do it during a bye week, which is a prime opportunity to do it. So I think he'll be back.
Jimmy G.
I mean, honestly, yeah, he'd probably operate it great, but they haven't bothered to even make that move because they haven't felt the need to. All right. Let's jump into Mount Studmore and Mount Bustmore for the week. And this is just very funny.
It's hard to put this guy on Mount Bustmore on Mount Studmore, excuse me, because who the fuck started him?
I know.
And we're talking about Sean Tucker, obviously, which is funny because last year and the year before, you've been all in on
long-time listeners of the show
on Sean Tucker because, you know, 2 years ago you didn't believe in Leonard Fournette, which rightfully so. I mean, we saw him, you know, really sputter out. And last year you were not a Rachaad White believer. And obviously Bucky Irving's a rookie. He wasn't there. So you were all Sean Tucker. Rachaad White goes down. Bucky Irving owners rejoice. He's going to get the lion's share of the carries. Everyone's going to realize he's better than Rachaad White, and he's going to take that job. You thought. And instead, we get Sean Tucker, 32.7 half PPR fantasy points for Sean Tucker.
Yeah, and it's funny, Pat, because hold on, I'm looking at my score from this week. Okay, so it wouldn't have made a difference anyway. I'm not going to say I was close to starting Sean Tucker because I wasn't. I was confident this past week. I was down bad because of Achane's bye week and Jonathan Taylor being out again. So my starting running backs this week were Zach Moss and Jeremy McNichols, who with Brian Robinson out, I figured would get some run. Did not get some run. Don't really know what happened there. He got like 2 touches.
Friend of the show, Austin Eckler.
But like Sean Tucker crossed my mind as like, you know, Rachaad White's going to be out. If I'm starting an RB2 as it is with McNichols, maybe you start Tucker. But again, I don't regret that move. Just the fact I even thought about it and I could have got 32 out of him is like, Jesus. But again, I would not have won anyway. I would have lost. I just checked 116 to 107, even if I did start him. So
which is worse in my opinion.
I know. I'm glad I just got blown out by 45. But yeah, Sean Tucker, 32.7 points, monster performance. And I think this is a problem for Bucky Irving owners because
it's a problem for everyone.
Todd Bowles has already said now that this guy's going to be involved in a three-headed monster. At the very least, a two-headed monster should Rachaad White's injury linger. And so, Bucky Irving, it sucks because it's like you've seen this gradual fading of Rachaad White. And it's like, okay, it's going to be Bucky time. It's going to be Bucky time. And now another guy's in the mix, and he looks really good, too.
And the thing is, this Rachaad White fading, I don't think is necessarily means him fading completely out of the picture. I think when he's back, he's still going to be involved because if they didn't believe in Rachaad White, they wouldn't have been trotting him out there watching him get 3 yards a carry or whatever the hell he was getting. Right. Even after last year, seeing how inefficient he was, obviously the numbers were huge just based on volume. If they didn't believe in that, they would have gone out and got another running back, and they didn't, except Bucky Irving. So I think this could just be, dooms for everyone involved, because if Rachaad White's there, you can't start Sean Tucker. Like, he's an really the RB3. Because the thing I didn't realize, I think I mixed up Bucky Irving and Sean Tucker in the preseason. Because I don't know why I thought Bucky Irving was the bruiser and Sean Tucker was this, dainty little flower. When Sean Tucker's a fucking brick. And Bucky's the little guy. I think I just completely flopped. So, Sean Tucker, at least Irving you think might get the change of pace. You want more of a speed back in there. With Rachaad White in there, is Sean Tucker, is he going to do enough to start? Probably not. Is Irving going to get enough to start? Probably not. Is White going to get enough to start with how inefficient he's been? Probably not.
Yeah, it's going to be.
And it's such a good offense. It sucks. It's such a good offense right now.
Yeah, it's going to be more of a speculative ad if you want to pick up Sean Tucker. I think it's worth it because a performance like this you can't ignore, but it's more of a wait and see. This isn't like, oh, he dropped 32, let me put him in my flex this week. This is kind of, you got to see. Because also, the Bucs, as great as their offense has looked, and I'm not saying it's not going to keep looking great, they're not going to score 51 points every week, obviously. So there's not going to be quite as much to go around. And not only are they not going to score 51 points every week, they're not going to score 51 points against the Saints, where Mike Evans routinely gets deleted. So you're looking at, lower point totals, closer to 30 on a good day, where Mike Evans is involved, and there's less to go around for this gaggle of running backs. But still worth picking up just on that performance.
Oh, you have to. If White's out this week, you've got to start him. And I still think you could start Bucky Irving too.
Yeah.
But if White comes back, it's unfortunate how this is probably just a backfield that you have to avoid when it's such a good fantasy offense right now.
I think we got to be on trade watch, don't we, for Rachaad White? I think Rachaad White might be a Dallas Cowboy or something in the next 2 weeks. That's where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
I think that's where I'm at with it, because
Raider.
the Bucs now have realized they have all these good running backs, and especially they've realized that Rachaad White is not going to be their 1A at the very least. So I could very well see, the Cowboys. Jerry Jones is already getting very defensive about not making any moves this offseason. He threatened to remove his own radio show host because they dared to question his lack of moves this offseason. So maybe he will be compelled to make some kind of move and get a running back that's not just
Happy
the
birthday,
definition of pure mid or worse than mid. They deserve that blowout. The second member of Mount Studmore had to put Joe Mixon back on here. 26.2 points in his first game back off of injury, putting any of those concerns to bed that the ankle might be a lingering problem, and just good to see for Mixon owners, because I was a little bit worried that this could be something. He's an older back for a running back. I know he's 27, 28, whatever. But still a guy that you are a little worried when they get an injury like that mid-season, especially with the high ankle.
And the thing, too, is that I think a little worrisome was that the Texans didn't look great when he was out. And I think that might be a direct correlation. And then they suddenly, pop back off that he's there, because Cam Akers was not good in terms of efficiency when he was the starter, and then whatever, Dario Ngubawale obviously is not a rusher. So having him back in there again, they went into the year expecting him to be one of the focus points of their offense, and now they're back thriving. And if they are the Texans that we thought they were going to be, even without Nico Collins, Joe Mixon to the moon, man.
Yep. I would agree. And then we have another beneficiary of that Bucs game, Chris Godwin.
Jesus Christ.
Again, I didn't stand a chance this week, but Chris Godwin was really a big part of that. Made sure I didn't stand a chance. Dropping 30.0 fantasy points, half PPR on my forehead. And I'll say this. Again, didn't think the Bucs were going to drop 51 on the Saints, but as I was facing a team in our league that had both Bucky Irving and Chris Godwin, I was like, really don't feel good about facing a team with the Buccaneers that aren't Mike Evans I feel like everything's about to get funneled through these guys because, again, Mike Evans traditionally gets locked up by Marshawn Lattimore. Happened
pretty
again.
much did. Yeah.
Pretty much did. They faced off. I saw the stat. They lined up against each other for 21 snaps, and Mike Evans was not targeted in those 21 snaps. And outside of that, I think he had like 40 yards or something like that. It was not a good fantasy day for Mike Evans, which we will get to in a second here. But Chris Godwin, the other member, or the third member, of Mount Studmore. And now the final member, Caleb Williams, popped off in London. We have to start paying some more attention to this Bears offense, or at the very least to Caleb Williams, because he's a guy that is showing he should maybe be in your starting lineup the rest of the way. Not this week because he's on bye, but overall, 28.64 points, tore up the Jacksonville Jaguars defense, which is, not super hard, but it's good to see that he did it anyway because he could have had a mediocre game. It just seems like he's progressing more and more every week. You're seeing him go through his reads. You're seeing him have these games. And I think maybe most notably, he had 28 points, and DJ Moore was not a factor. Like, he was able to spread it around across so many different receivers. Cole Kmet had 2 touchdowns. I think Keenan Allen had 2 touchdowns.
Yes, he did.
So, this is a rookie that is coming along, and I think you are going to be able to start him every week.
Yeah, and the thing is, you could talk about, they just play the Jaguars. Have you seen their schedule? Their schedule is very, very light going forward. So there's no reason to believe that they can't still be in games and can't be in positions where Caleb can play like this. The offense has just looked really, really solid. And like, we kind of talked about how make or break this was for Matt Eberflus and company, how hot their seats were, and he's looked really good. And for example, like, I'm taking him off my taxi squad on my dynasty team. I was thinking, like, you may not have to touch him. I need my quarterback position has been dreadful. So Caleb is definitely a guy. And also, you forgot to mention known long snapper Cole Kmet with 2 touchdowns.
Was he their long snapper in that
Their
game?
guy,
I didn't wake up for this one.
I believe he was snapping on like their last 3-point afters. I guess their long snapper got hurt. Yeah, and apparently everything went well. But yeah, I saw on the sideline, like, he asked, like, he said, "Oh, so and so got hurt," and he's like, "Oh, who?" And they're going, "No, the long snapper. You're the long snapper."
Yeah, a little inside info here. Not that this is something anybody doesn't know, but Pat's in Eastern time, so the London games start at a reasonable 9:30
Yeah,
a.m.
7. Yeah, fuck that.
They start at 7:30 for me, so unless I'm really compelled to see a certain matchup, I don't wake up for those. Thankfully, I'll be making my trip back east this week, so I will actually be in the Eastern time zone for the Patriots to play in London, which is just a beautiful coincidence. So I won't have to wake up at the ass crack of dawn.
Chip Perio is what I
Chip
just said.
Perio. Very nice.
Fuck me, dude.
Okay, let's move on to Mount Busmore, the players who were very, very, very disappointing this week. Dak Prescott, 3.22 fantasy points against the Detroit Lions. I don't know if this is just going to become a trend for these Dallas Cowboys, that they are just horrific before the bye every year, and their bye last year was around the same time. I think it was like week 7. But this was bad. 3.22. You have that kind of bottom barrel performance, and it's the kind of performance that gets you dropped in fantasy leagues, and I think that is totally fair. Pat's addressing the spammers in our chat right now again. Can't get rid of them.
And then I answered the question.
So we don't answer spam questions, and then he answers it.
But it's not going to happen again.
Won't happen again.
It's like that one guy that got away with it. But that's not going to happen a second time.
So, Dak Prescott, first member of Mount Busmore as part of a just completely broken Cowboys offense. Second member of Mount Busmore here, got to go with Saquon Barkley, 6.4 points with a sort of equally broken-looking Eagles team. Because, yes, they won their game and they won it by 4 points, but it was against the Cleveland Browns, who, Pat, I think you and I could scrap together a team from our high school and probably beat the Browns.
That's a big win. Like, that's the kind of win you argue with your home crowd about. That's the... what a fucking bozo that guy is. But yeah, I mean, A.J. Brown was fantastic. And I didn't realize how consistent Davante Smith has been, too. Like, he hasn't been, like, a stud of any kind, but he's been really solid. And it was clear as day because Saquon did not do shit. Unfortunately, especially, like, in, like, a weekly guillotine draft I'm in, he's been routinely going in the top 2 overall. Him and Derrick Henry every week. So if you, that was not a great week to be there.
Yeah, a tough one for Saquon in a matchup that, you weren't particularly scared of. But lucky for Saquon and the Eagles, they have a pretty soft schedule for fantasy coming up, so he should bounce back fairly quickly. Mike Evans, again, the other side of the Bucs coin here, 4.4 points. We've just come to expect this against Marshawn Lattimore. It's like,
didn't he have like a 20-yard
like
catch on the first drive or something? He had like
probably
a decent gain on the first drive where it's like, maybe this won't be. Nope. Try again.
Yeah,
at least he's not getting ejected or whatever.
It's just funny how predictable it is because, there's receiver cornerback matchups that you fear, and then, the receiver at least gets the better of them sometimes. But Mike Evans, he and Lattimore have been in this division together now for years, and I think the best game he ever had was like 60 yards and a touchdown. It's absolutely wild.
It's not like Lattimore's some like super elite tight end anymore. Jesus Christ. Well, of course he's not a fucking elite tight end, but I was gonna call him a fucking long snapper. It's not like he's some super elite corner anymore. He's still really good, but like that, when's the last time, except for like Aqib Talib on Michael Crabtree, that we've seen a man just have someone, or everyone on Michael Crabtree, have a man's number like that? You put a sorry-ass receiver like Crabtree? Yep, bald. Yep, deserved.
It is very funny because it's like generally you have you start your studs, concept, ideology, right? And I think that pays off more often than not. Like if you have a star receiver like Justin Jefferson or Amon-Ra and they face a great corner, it's like, yeah, they might get locked up by Surtain, but then they're going to have a decent game against Sauce Gardner, whatever. Evans, it's like bankable. He's going to suck against Marshawn Lattimore. We know this. And
also,
then DJ
Pat,
Moore,
are you drunk? You're going to be very surprised to know that I have never had a drop of alcohol in my life, man. This is just my brain rot. We're getting extreme brain rot. We are the driest podcast.
This has to be the most sober podcast in general out there, at least the most sober fantasy football podcast, I would think.
Let's just get hammered one week.
If my fantasy season keeps going the way it is, I'm in. DJ Moore, last member of Mount Busmore this week, 4.0 points. I mentioned, Caleb really had a great game. They really abused the Jaguars secondary, but DJ Moore was just not a part of it. Better days, presumably, ahead for him. Now, Pat.
Pat is the drunkest sober man. You guys stop. I'm getting too distracted. It's funny as shit.
Let's get into just some general team outlooks because there were some really notable performances just from teams in general this week that I want to touch on. So first things first, the Detroit Lions. They dominated the Cowboys, as we mentioned, but I think it's becoming a valid question. Are they so good that their weapons are unreliable week to week? And when I say unreliable, I don't mean you're not starting them. I don't mean that you're benching Amon-Ra St. Brown, obviously, or Sam Laporta. But to me, it's like, when you look at ranking some of these guys for the rest of the year, and you look at, I'll say a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown, because Laporta's been underwhelming in general. Amon-Ra St. Brown salvaged his day with a touchdown at the very end of the game. But the Lions did not need him to win that game. And I'm like, does this knock him down just a couple of notches? Because there are other receivers, say a Malik Neighbors, Pat, when healthy. He's going to get all of the work he can handle in that offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Lions can score legitimately 50 points without him barely doing anything. And so it becomes a weird thing. It's like the team, you want fantasy players on good teams generally, but the Lions are almost too good, and it's very odd.
Except there was one guy, and obviously the question that we got asked was Montgomery or Gibbs. And my answer was Montgomery because that man has been unbelievably consistent. And like we said, that offense is so good that they are going to get red zone and goal line opportunities. And when they are at the goal line, David Montgomery is going to get the ball and his big ass is going to get in the end zone. Like, he is such a sure thing. But it's so true. Like, I was looking at Jamison Williams' numbers today, and he's been really good. But then he had the one game where he had like 2. So it's to show that these guys can all be like, but you're still probably starting Jamison Williams on a weekly basis here, as you are Amon-Ra and Jahmyr Gibbs as well. But it just goes to show that the floor is nothing for these, is almost nothing for these guys, yet they could still win games. But fact of the matter is, David Montgomery he was your boy, wasn't he?
He was my boy,
and he's been better than I think even you could have imagined him.
Yeah, I did not see this playing out. And again, I want to make it clear, like, when I broach this concept about Amon-Ra St. Brown, it's not that I'm saying you should bench him in favor of other players. It's more about how you should view him in like trade discussions and just how you should view his outlook the rest of the year, because these are now, Pat, he's had 3 games this season out of 5 under 50 receiving yards. Like, that's not what you're looking for from Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, he salvaged 2 of those. He salvaged 2 of those games with touchdowns. And obviously the other one was that week 1, just absolute debacle, 3 catches, 13 yards, 2.8 points. But like, I think there's a point where, maybe you sell Amon-Ra St. Brown off of name value and the generally good production so far. He's only wide receiver 20, but like decent enough when you look at the game log.
They've had a bye as well, too.
Yeah,
so.
that's true. When you look at the game log and see basically 17 points a week, I think there's something to be said for that. Like, maybe you go and try to sell him for a receiver that's a little bit higher of a priority in their offense, because it's not only Sam Laporta that's feeling the effects of, Jamison Williams being pretty good this year and the run game being even better than it was last year. I just think it caps his ceiling a little bit. So it's just something to think about. The Chicago Bears, can they keep this up? They're heading into their bye. I think overall, yeah, they probably can. I'm very optimistic for Caleb Williams. Just, it seems like he's figuring things out to me.
And it's like we said, you said DJ Moore didn't have a very good game. That's really the only game he's had this year that wasn't at least really solid. Like, he has kind of been what you expected, where he was kind of going at that 2-3 turn there. And he's returned value. In Keenan Allen, I saw a quote from Keenan Allen today about just how good it felt for him to be fully healthy and then to produce like that. And, we really haven't seen a whole lot from Roma Dunze, and I mean, we still may not. And Cole Kmet's tough, because we've seen the highs and we've seen the lows. He has no floor. But again, with the tight end landscape and how good we've seen this Bears offense be, I feel like you got to kind of start Cole Kmet here. And DeAndre Swift heard the noise. I said it last week. He heard the noise. And he has, really turned it around. And he's another guy, especially with, how crazy running backs get with injuries and bye weeks. DeAndre Swift should pretty much be in your lineup for the time being.
Yeah, and I mean, look, we do want to contextualize this with the last 2 matchups they've had, right? I mean, it's as bad as it gets. It's the Panthers and the Jaguars have been the last 2 games Caleb Williams has faced. I have his game log up right now. That's why I'm mentioning him specifically as it relates to the Bears. Last 2 weeks, Caleb's gone for 28.64 and 23.56 against the Panthers. So, you have to take that into account. But also, the week before that, Pat, was against the Rams, who also notably bad defense, and yet
especially in the secondary.
He only had 11.48 points in that game. So to me, that's where I'm seeing a bit more of a progression from Caleb Williams, where you can probably more confidently start him as the season goes on. And at least over these next few weeks, after the bye,
Commanders. Cardinals, yeah.
Commanders, Cardinals, Patriots aren't as scary as they could be if they were healthy, sadly. And then after that, it gets dicey. You get Packers, Vikings, but I think you're at
Detroit still is a little suspect in the secondary.
They are, but then after that,
they're going to stop
Niners.
Yeah.
Niners after that, Vikings. It's a tough stretch, but I think he's worth picking up at least for this upcoming stretch of games. And then who knows? Maybe he shows enough that you will feel confident starting him against some slightly tougher matchups. But Caleb Williams is a guy that I think is more than startable because this Bears offense and him are just coming along. The Buccaneers, I just want to mention, I think the offense is officially better than it was with Canales. Yeah. They are scoring even more. They were the offense I was the most hesitant on because you saw such a drastic change when Canales took over for the better. And then, any sort of change when things were going well is going to make you a little bit worried. It made me worried. I didn't think that Liam Cohen coming in was going to be able to kind of sustain that same thing, but he has done more than that. And he's turned not just, Mike Evans and Chris Godwin into startable fantasy assets, but Baker Mayfield is the QB3 on the year.
Baker's had that one miserable game against, I forget who it was against, but then he has been nails the rest of the way. And I think that was kind of the biggest detractor against Chris Godwin, was the concern just hey, we don't know what this offense is going to look like without Dave Canales. Baker Mayfield could turn back into a pumpkin, but all the talk was that he's going to be in the slot and he thrives in the slot, and boy does he. And Liam Cohen has been able to keep Baker elevated to the level he played last year better. And yeah, Evans had the bad week, but I think we could genuinely chalk that up as the Marshawn Lattimore anomaly, and you're still feeling good about Mike Evans. And even a guy like Cade Otton has been very, very steady, going to give you 7 or 8 points a week, which tight end, as a low-end tight end one, is not bad.
Yep. Agreed. And then the last team I want to touch on here is the Dallas Cowboys, the team on the other end of that Lions blowout, just because this has been bad. Dak Prescott has not been what you want as a fantasy quarterback. If you were hoping that his sort of second half surge last season was going to be a sign of things to come, or if you were just hoping that the fact the Cowboys made him the highest paid quarterback in NFL history was going to translate to him being good from week one, not just figuring it out halfway through the year, you've also been disappointed.
Can we get a we kind of blow?
Yeah, we kind of blow. So Dak has only been over 16 points. Let's put it this way. He's only been over 17 points once, and it was a 29-point barrage against the Baltimore Ravens. Other than that, his fantasy point totals, I'll just start with week one and go in order. 11.46, 12.92, then the 29-pointer, 16.74, 16.38, and now bottoming out at 3.22. It's ugly.
You could live with that before the 3, but now it's like...
Even then, it was like you only really got one game of like you're very happy with it.
It was still ugly. Common Patrick Mahomes stat lines, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They did this last year where after the bye, they looked much better, and maybe that'll happen again. But after the bye, they've got San Francisco, and then they've got Atlanta. I'll say this, things open up a lot at like the end of the year. They have a stretch from week 12 on. I mean, look, this is just the nature of the division they're in. Commanders, Giants, Bengals, Panthers, 4-game stretch. I mean, but that you have to get to that point because that's almost your fantasy playoffs, that stretch, and then it includes some of the fantasy playoffs. So I think the Cowboys have a nice schedule coming up at the end, but it's not right out of the bye, which is what makes me worried that these struggles are just going to continue for them. And I don't know how good you can feel about starting any Cowboy that's not CeeDee Lamb at this point.
Yeah, I was going to say Lamb has still been underwhelming, but not in like a really bad way. Like, he was my first round pick, and I feel okay about it. Like, could be a lot worse, but yeah, I mean, Rico Dowdle, we saw what that running game can look like at its worst, and it's non-existent.
Yeah, it is brutal. All right, let's move on to our ouchie outlook, Pat. We will cover some of the injuries, as many injuries as we possibly can from this past week. Ouch. All right. Lots of concussions, unfortunately. We'll start here with Marvin Harrison.
Me, apparently.
Marvin Harrison Jr., concussion. Chris Olave, concussion. So we kind of know how these go. We don't know what the timetable is going to be. You can never really predict it. Generally, it's a safe bet you're going to miss at least 1 week. Chris Olave, all but guaranteed because they are playing on Thursday Night Football.
He still hasn't cleared.
Yeah, he is going to miss this week against the Denver Broncos, barring an absolute miracle.
And so is Rashid Shaheed, man. What the? Your boy Mason Tipton's about to have a huge game.
It's Bub Means season, baby.
Bub Means.
He's here. These guys, a lot of injuries popped up for receivers this week. So Harrison Jr. concussion, Chris Olave concussion, and then on top of Shaheed, you've got Jaden Reed with an ankle injury. So it is ugly out here.
The Marvin Harrison one looked scary. Like that. To watch him just get up and just go right back down like that is just, that's nasty. Hopefully, within the next couple weeks, he can get that figured out. And yeah, hopefully the Jaden Reed one is minor. I'll be kind of fucked if it's not. So, so you want to, just keep that shit together, my guy. Thanks.
Yeah, so Jaden Reed, we're kind of waiting on the exact severity. Rashid Shaheed, it sounds like it's not good for Rashid Shaheed. We're hearing some reports from Nick Underhill that the Saints are worried about it. And, the Saints might just be cursed this season after what was a blistering start. Now everybody's hurt.
Kamara's going to have 50 touches.
Oh, God, yeah.
I'm facing him. Oh, God.
Or he's just going to be bad because they know that that's literally all they can do now. But, yeah, I mean, still not great. Because
Sean Payton revenge game, though.
True. I mean, 20 receptions in PPR is still going to kill you, even if they're a yard away from the line of scrimmage. Moving on to the running backs here. James Cook is obviously nursing a toe injury. A bit of a surprise inactive last night on Monday Night Football. Well, it was weird because it sounded like, he's in genuine danger of missing the game. And then it was like, no, he should be good to play. And then that morning, they elevated Frank Gore Jr., of all people, to the active roster. And
got so much press.
Not great. And then James Cook ended up getting ruled out. breakout. It was the Ray Davis breakout game. And, now we're at a point where if he's missing one game, we don't know if he's possibly in jeopardy of missing a second one. It sounds like Sean McDermott is relatively optimistic, but it's not a sure thing yet.
I think the fact that he saw the practice field on Saturday, unless there was a setback, but I feel like we would have heard about that. So the fact that he got out there last week would make you think he'll be good to go for this week. And are you scared of Ray Davis? I'm not. I mean, I think Ray Davis has earned some more work, but James Cook has been really good. And, it could be, as we just saw with Ray Davis, maybe it's a product of the offense. But still, James Cook is their guy. And that said, if Ray Davis is available, go get him. I don't care. Get him if Cook misses this week or just for down the line, especially if you're a James Cook owner. Our league mate Austin was telling me in another league he was so busy watching the Yankees, who were winning 3-0, by the way, that he forgot to check if Cook was out, and he had Davis sitting on his bench and lost by 14. Davis had 18. Oof. So check your lineups, kids.
Painful.
Check your lineups.
That hurts. Oh, man, yeah. Always check your lineups. So we'll see what happens with James Cook. Travis Etienne has a hamstring injury now. This guy just cannot stay together on top of what was already a shoulder injury. Now he's dealing with a hamstring, and he's also dealing with being worse than Tank Bigsby, and he's dealing with Dearness Johnson apparently being a thing and kind of decent for the Jags.
I said it last week. If Etienne was out, Dearness Johnson's going to be a thing. I didn't think it was going to be that much, but...
Well, that was the thing, is that it was, the Jags were getting destroyed by the Bears. They were in a lot of passing down situations, and it turns out, for as good as Tank Bigsby looks in the run game, they do not trust him yet in the pass game, which is what led to Dearness Johnson getting so much work.
That's what he did in Cleveland, yeah.
Exactly. So, I mean, if ETN ends up continuing to miss time, I think Dearness Johnson is worth a speculative ad, even though you can't feel great about it with Tank Bigsby in the picture, but it's still worth monitoring.
I still think you're starting Tank Bigsby if ETN is out. But, for example, my running back 2 in our league right now is currently Justice Hill or a blank spot. So, would I be fine starting Dearness Johnson? Yes, I'd be fine starting just about anybody right now. So, if you're really desperate in a PPR league, you could do worse. Not much worse, but, you could do worse than Dearness Johnson. But, yeah, you still think they've got to believe in ETN when he gets back, but the fact that he's had a couple of these injuries like this and he hasn't looked particularly good. I mean, I think the best bet for them is let him get healthy, because you could see that shoulder injury must have been lingering even beforehand, and you need to get him at full strength. And again, they are awful. The chat has, anytime we've talked about the Bears, chat has just mobbed that the Jags are terrible, and yes, they are. Yeah, yes, they are.
Also, Doug Peterson's not going to be their coach after this week. I stand.
So do you Patriots? You like the Patriots this week?
I do.
I think I do too.
I predicted this weeks back, which was before so many of these developments happened. But now, as we lead up to the game, especially, the Patriots looking like a competent offense and the Jags offense being generally incompetent, I think the Patriots are going to come away with this one, and I think it's going to be the nail in the coffin for Doug Peterson, which, again, predicted that about 6 weeks ago, I think. So, goodbye, Doug. Good riddance. And then we'll see what that means for the offense after that, if anything. But, yeah, I think
that's Urban Meyer's music.
Oh, fuck no. Jordan Mason dealing with a shoulder injury. As we know, the Niners were, I was going to say on bye. It felt like they were on bye because they played on Thursday night. But Jordan Mason's shoulder injury, we're unsure if he's going to be able to play this week. That would put Isaac Guerendo firmly on the radar, but this is just another one to watch. Guerendo becomes startable if Mason were to miss.
That's Kyle Juszczyk's music.
No. Jerome Ford, Pat, your boy, has a hamstring injury. If he wasn't already not an exciting start with Nick Chubb expected to be back, he's especially
backwards. I'll eat the L every week for the rest of the year on Jerome Ford. What an L. But I deserve it for believing in a Cleveland Brown.
Yeah, believe land it is not. They are just hot ass. So we're watching that for Jerome Ford. But with Nick Chubb back, you probably weren't happily starting Jerome Ford anyway, even if Nick Chubb is, limited. But you can't. This offense is so bad, there's not enough to go around for multiple members.
Hamstrings are so tough, too. Hamstrings are just so tough.
Yeah. Aaron Jones, the Vikings were on a bye. He's dealing with a hip injury. It doesn't sound like he's going to play this week. But
Cam Akers, that's a little bizarre, because had they wanted Cam Akers there with Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler, they just would have brought him back. That's true. So that was my first thought, because apparently it seems Jones wouldn't have played. And it's the hip. I think it's the hamstring that's the problem, not the hip.
The hip is what's been being reported
he's got
lately.
Two.
I think he might have both, but yeah, that's been
so it's lingering. But I mean, like, Ty Chandler's a must start if he's the guy. I mean, this will be like the first week in a while we aren't glazing the Vikings offense just because we haven't seen him in a week. But that offense has been really fucking good, and if he's the guy, regardless of his inefficiencies this year, you've got to start him even with Cam Akers. But yeah, that's a little. I don't have any Aaron Jones stock, but a little concerned. If I did.
It's a little weird to me because it's like if they were worried enough to make a deal like that, why is Aaron Jones not on IR? Like that feels like the kind of move you make when you put a guy on IR and then you know you need an extra depth. But who knows? Maybe they just didn't like the depth they had behind Ty Chandler and they felt the need to go get a guy.
You lose Myles Gaskin and things just go to hell.
They wanted to go get a guy that they were familiar with from last year. Cam Akers didn't look very good for Minnesota last year and then looked awesome for Houston in the preseason and in spurts of the regular season this year. So who knows? Dallas Goedert, hamstring injury, doesn't really affect much for fantasy unless you are a true desperate sicko and want to start Grant Calcaterra at tight end.
He had a big gain.
I saw he had a big gain.
Early in the day, I'm like, who the f...
I would say don't be fooled by that, and there's really no corresponding move to make here.
Just get ready for A.J. Brown and Davante Smith to just keep eating. They've both been really good when they're on the field.
Yeah, even then, it's like those guys, Dallas Goedert hasn't really been very good, productive week to week anyway, so it's whatever. We've got some guys on return watch this week, guys that have already missed time and that we think could be coming back this week. Half my fantasy team to lead it off, Jonathan Taylor, Malik Neighbors, and Devon Achane. Watching Taylor with the ankle. Neighbors, which this would be, if he were to miss, it would be his third straight game miss with a concussion, which that would be very concerning if that were to come to pass. Devon Achane, the Dolphins coming off the bye, so he could always have a Neighbors sort of reaction and also miss what would be a second game with a concussion, but they obviously didn't have to miss last week because of the bye. We'll see, but as of right now, he's on return watch. He was spotted at practice with a red non-contact jersey today, so that's seemingly good news at the very least. Anthony Richardson sounds like he's going to be back, so downgrade all Colts pass catchers.
Jesus. Who would have thought we'd be saying that, especially with how much you and I liked Richardson until the preseason, I guess, but they're saying that would be such a downgrade from Joe fucking Flacco.
Yeah, Joe Flacco is him at this point. Cooper Kupp sounds like could make his return this week. If not this week, hopefully next week, but he is eligible to come back. And Brian Robinson just missed this week. Again, I started Jeremy McNichols hoping he would be a thing, and he wasn't. But Brian Robinson, it didn't sound like his injury was too severe anyway, so we're looking at him.
Yeah, that was another kind of like slightly surprising one because I think he logged some practice last week. I could be wrong here.
I believe he was getting downgraded throughout the week, and it wasn't looking great. But it was like, he's going to have a chance, and then they actually ruled him out on Saturday.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It was who is a must start? The boy. Come back on the podcast. I need another bald man here. Yep. Austin Eckler, come on. But yeah, Eckler, I didn't realize he in half PPR, I believe he's finished between 8 and 12 points every week, which technically as a backup, that's pretty solid. Like he's been pretty solid in his role, but obviously with more volume, you got to start him because Brian Robinson's been really good. He's been really good.
Yeah, I mean, as a flex guy, like if you were to have left Austin Eckler in your flex all year, I think you'd be relatively happy up to this point. And he looks like he's got the juice that I thought he might have left in the tank. He just doesn't have the workload that he once had in Los Angeles. But guys, breaking news, shocker that Austin Eckler isn't completely washed, and he was just dealing with an ankle injury all of last year, like I tried to tell people.
And as a friend of the show.
All right, we're also watching Ramondre Stevenson, who this would be a pretty big return if, now that he would be returning to a functional Patriots offense.
Antonio Gibson looked awful.
Antonio Gibson is awful.
What was it, 13 for 19 or something? Like, wasn't it that bad?
Probably. I would also venture a guess that the Texans were probably a little bit more, not afraid of the run, but like, we're going to make the rookie quarterback test us would be my guess. But yeah, he was not good. Let me pull up Gibson's numbers here because I'm sure the Patriots are going to be missing Ramondre. Yeah, we're looking at 13 carries for 19 yards, 3 catches for 24 yards. Ramondre will certainly take back the lion's share of carries when he returns. Rachaad White, we're kind of, I want the guy healthy, but kind of hoping he doesn't come back for fantasy purposes. Take your time.
Oh, shit, I just fumbled in my guillotine draft. I should have taken Baker Mayfield. Whoops.
And Devin Singletary, who of all people, probably lost his job the most in his time away because Tyrone Tracy, you cannot put Tyrone Tracy back in the bottle. He has looked
And it's because Devin Singletary did a fine. Like, he did his job, really, but yeah, Tyrone Tracy, the rookie, is looked so good. He's
looked a lot more than fine. I saw a tweet from Art Stapleton, who covers the Giants, and he said he expects it to be probably a 70-30 split in favor of Tracy when Singletary returns. So we'll see if that is this week. We've got our PUP list. PUP dates are players that started on the PUP. Nick Chubb is officially tracking to return this week. I don't think you could start him in his first game back. I think maybe if you're really desperate. I mean, with Ford out and against a Bengals defense, you could probably find worse plays, but That's what I mean about it.
As a man who's actively courting Deontay Foreman for his starting lineup, I think you could do worse than Nick Chubb.
I got a shiny Zach Moss for you. TJ Hawkinson, who you also have, is tracking to return this week. Pat, you don't need to because you have George Kittle, but would you start TJ Hawkinson this week if you needed to?
I mean, I guess there's a chance, like if Marvin Harrison and Jaden Reed are out, where he might be my best flex option. And yes, my expectations are pretty low, but we've seen some good things out of Jordan Addison, but it is clear that there is still that second target in that offense up for grabs. And, you talk about it consistently that's what it takes to be a tight end one, is to have that kind of opportunity. And he may not get it right away, but he's still TJ Hawkinson. We'll see. But yeah, I'm not, again, with tight end being such a wasteland at points, you're not looking forward to, but I think he will be very startable within the next few weeks.
I would agree. And then my boy Jonathan Brooks is finally expected to have his practice window opened, which means, likely not returning to game action this week, but we are getting an actual step closer to that. That would put him in the 3-week window of being able to, or having to, return to the active roster if he is going to play at all this season, which we assume he is going to. So I'm just happy that this clock is finally starting for Jonathan Brooks.
Chuba Hubbard's just been good.
Here's the thing, man.
After that week 1 dud, he has... I mean, the last 4 weeks, his lowest was this past week where he went 18 for 92. Like, the guy's just been good, especially on a bad team.
Here's the thing, though. Chuba Hubbard's been good. That O-line's been really good. Like, the Panthers made investments in that O-line, and so that's why I'm not quite ready, and I know this is, as a Brooks owner, this is going to just sound like copium and my guy's better and all that. Like, Hubbard's going to be involved when Brooks, gets active, and I'm aware of that. But, like, I'm just not looking at these Chuba Hubbard performances and thinking that he's I don't think he's an above average running back. I don't. I think he's an average, super average running back.
No, I mean, that's fair, but I think it does give them more incentive to ease Brooks back in.
I know it definitely does, but I think we're looking at a case here where Chuba Hubbard is Devin Singletary and Jonathan Brooks is Tyrone Tracy. I think that's the situation we have here because Hubbard is putting up numbers like what Singletary put up last year with the Texans and even early this year with the Giants. Hubbard's just fine, but he's taking what the defense is giving him, which there's something to be said for that because obviously there's bad running backs that don't do that. But I just, I think I'm not going crazy on Chuba Hubbard. They're both going to play when Brooks is back, and I think they're both going to be playable when Brooks is back. I think they'll both be sort of flex option kind of guys because the Panthers have been damn good at running the ball this year. All right, we'll move on to our waiver targets here really quick. A lot of these guys have been guys we've touched on throughout the show, especially through the waiver or through the injury segment, Starting at running back, Ray Davis, if he's available in your league. Look, James Cook doesn't seem like it's going to be a long-term injury, but this is a guy just with this performance. If you're able to stash a guy, I know not a lot of people are able to stash guys right now. You need guys that can actually start for you. But if you could stash a guy, 20 carries for 97 yards and 3 catches for 55 against the Jets, that's notable. And there's a chance that this turns into a more split backfield and he becomes a relevant piece.
Yeah, we're looking at the very least a pristine backup. A handcuff, one of the top guys.
Yeah, he is. He passed the eye test. We can say that with utmost certainty. Ty Chandler, I mean, I felt better about this one before Cam Akers got traded there. I think he's still going to be the starter should Aaron Jones miss time. Yeah. But Cam Akers, it's not like he has to get familiar with the system. He just needs a refresher course. So I don't know. I don't feel as confident that it's going to be like, Ty Chandler's going to get 18 touches and Akers is going to get 3. Like, this could be one gets 12 and one gets 8. But still, if you're desperate for a running back and you're looking for a guy who is going to at least be the starter in name and in the slight majority of touches, I think Ty Chandler is the guy for you. Jalen Wright, Dolphins are on bye this past week. Davante Chan is technically not through concussion protocol right now, but that's because he physically can't be because they haven't had a real practice yet. But also, even if and when he returns, God, I hope. Jalen Wright, I think, is a guy worth a speculative ad if he's available in your league, just because he looked just as good, if not better, than Raheem Mostert last week. He's younger. Yeah. He's a guy that the Dolphins want to take over that Mostert role at some point. Whether they let him do it this year fully, I don't know. I'm very curious to see how this rotation shakes out with all 3 of the Dolphins' top backs healthy, but it's worth an ad because he had over 80 rushing yards in his last game after Achane got hurt. Isaac Guerrero, we mentioned. If Jordan Mason misses, I think that is a very startable play because any running back in that Niners system is going to be good. Sean Tucker, mentioned him before, speculative ad. And Pat, we made it an hour and 24 minutes into the show without mentioning this guy. And quite honestly, I'm
here
shocked.
we go.
Kimani Vidal.
One-play merchant.
I really can't victory lap him too much because he was a one-play merchant. But I mentioned it briefly last week when we had somebody ask us. It wasn't even in the recorded version on Spotify because it was a viewer question after the show. But they asked me, like, I'm 0-5. How do I salvage my team? I was like, you have to take dart throws at guys and get ahead of the curve that people aren't really thinking about yet. Kimani Vidal was that guy. I tweeted about Kimani Vidal as well, and I got a lot of people in my replies like, what's wrong with you? Like, he's not going to do anything. You're crazy. I'm like, okay, wait and see. He didn't go crazy. He didn't get a lot of touches. J.K. Dobbins carried the ball 25 times, but Kimani Vidal had a nice little 38-yard touchdown reception because he got work, and he looked good. He also, I think, somewhat passed the eye test. And, Pat, as much as I like, or as much as I was impressed by J.K. Dobbins and how he's continued to look pretty good this season, look, the Chargers just had their bye. I do not see any way J.K. Dobbins is getting 20-plus touches a game the rest of the season. I don't believe his body is going to be able to handle that. I believe Kimani Vidal is going to be involved. You can't start him this week, again, because we don't chase the big upside plays. No. But I think there is a more than likely chance, now that he has his first little bit of game action, that he just gets more and more involved as the season goes on. And you could do so much worse than taking a stab at a guy who is on a team that wants to run the ball, has a great O-line, and the only guy ahead of him on the depth chart now that Gus Edwards is on IR is a guy with such a massive injury history. So I think it's Kimani Vidal season, baby.
He's absolutely an ad, but again, in the era of I need a guy to start right now, he's probably not the guy. That's why we have him at the bottom of our list, and I think that's where he belongs because I think those other guys are better chances to start. But it was kind of a one-play merchant deal, but he looked damn good. He looked explosive. He got out there and made it happen. And, I feel like Gus Edwards' goose is kind of just cooked. Even when he comes back, there's really no need for Gus Edwards in that offense. I guess Dobbins can kind of be more of the short yardage. But I guess it all takes is a Dobbins injury. I mean, they undrafted guy that made the team, and they've had healthy and active, but they obviously like the kid, and he looked good.
Yeah, Kimani Vidal, baby, go get him. He would be one of my probably higher waiver targets if he wasn't already on my team.
I drafted him in a bunch of leagues and cut him in all of them.
I did too. Moving on to wide receivers, Demario Douglas, we mentioned him. He just appears to be the most bankable Patriots receiver, and with a quarterback that actually knows how to throw the fucking ball now, that is valuable, especially in PPR formats, because that's the type of receiver he is. It's kind of a even better bonus. Juju Smith-Schuster, in many leagues, he probably went unclaimed because the Chiefs did not play this past week, so you didn't see him up there in your projected points when you were looking at guys for week 6. But now that the Chiefs are back and are going to play this week, Juju could still be out there in your league. I think you got to go get him as the Chiefs' de facto wide receiver 1. And
I'm so scared of him though.
I know, me too.
I'm afraid to start him just because you could just see the 2 catches for 15 yards brewing in that Chiefs offense. I hope not. I mean, I hope that he's really the top dog, and I believe it's more likely than not. But in a guillotine format, for a weekly guillotine format, for example, I'm scared shitless of him.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you can confidently start him. I think he's a guy that you have as depth, but he's like very, very viable depth. Again, we mentioned it last year.
Oh, yeah.
Or we mentioned it last show where, Juju's year with the Chiefs, I was a big believer in him, and anybody that drafted him, they probably overdrafted him because he was like a 5th or 6th round pick, but he finished as wide receiver 29. And so if you believe that there's any chance he can repeat that level of production, which I don't know why he couldn't, he has the same, if not a bigger role than he had then. Like wide receiver 29 isn't going to be something that generally wins you a week or is some super high-end asset, but it's something that should be rostered for sure. And I think that's very possible that he gets back to that level of production. And Michael Wilson, Pat, if he's available in leagues with Marvin Harrison Jr. dealing with that concussion, Michael Wilson becomes the Cardinals wide receiver 1, and I think he is more than capable of being a wide receiver 1 type of guy. We saw it at points last year. So I'd be excited for him in the event that Marvin misses some time. I think he's startable. Tight end, Cade Otton just continues to kind of be involved with this Bucs offense. It's one of those offenses where if you really need a tight end, like just get a piece of it. I believe he's had, like 40 plus yards in several straight games or a touchdown. And so he's not going to be, again, a guy that's going to win you a week, but he's a guy that I think you could do a lot worse as far as
40 yards or a touchdown in 4 straight weeks.
Yeah,
very,
so I mean,
very
look,
consistent.
That's wonderful. I don't think that's bad at all. And then Hunter Henry, who we touched on before, becomes a tight end back on the radar. And then quarterbacks, Drake Maye was the only one I wrote down because I think I forgot to write down more, but he is very much an option at this point.
I guess if Caleb Williams is somehow available.
Yeah, I don't think he's super available anymore. At least it's not under 50%. Yeah, he's 50.1% rostered in ESPN.
Not allowed on the list.
Not allowed on the list. Just taking a look at some of these other quarterbacks that might be available. I don't really think there's any you feel great about.
There's none jumping to my top of my mind right now.
No, I think Drake May is the one that has the upside that you'd be interested in. One guy I keep just kind of keeping my eye on is Tua for whenever he does come back, because they have a stretch from at least week 10 on where it's Rams and Raiders, and well, it gets kind of hard after that. But, that's a guy, just don't forget about him should he find his way back. But folks, as we finish up our waiver segment, that means we are finishing up the show for the day. So thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully we can help you win some leagues. Hopefully we can help you make some money moves in fantasy. Oh, I didn't hit the money moves thing. I forgot that's our waiver segment thing. Hold on, let me hit it.
Make it move, make it move, make it $1,000,000 move. Make it move, make it move, make it $1,000,000 move. Make it move, make it move.
I feel like I've only seen that like once before. I feel like you're forgetting that with some consistency.
I do. I think I implemented it, and the first week I implemented it, I used it, and then after that I didn't use it anymore. But anyway, I'm going to try to remember that going forward. Guys, thank you for watching. For Pat Gustafson, I am Brandon Carney, and we will see you guys next week.
I promise I'm not drunk, just mentally deteriorating. Bye-bye.
Aren't we all? And for anybody still here with us on the live show, we'll answer some questions for about 5-10 minutes or so. Got a couple of starred messages here we got to get through. Hopefully you guys are still here because, as you guys know, we answer these at the end of the show. Any don't-know questions we receive. Detrain24 with $4.99 said, can my Giants also lose all the games we can? Down with Trash Can Dan.
I'm sure they will. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, probably. Lions Fan Syndicate with $1.99 said 5 players that I should buy high or low on. I'll be honest. $1.99 is not enough for 5 players to buy high or low on.
I'll give you one up. First guy off the top of my head is obviously one of your boys, Davante. With Tua's return imminent, we've seen what this guy can do, how efficient he can be when that offense is clicking. So if you can, go get him with the injury and with some of the lower results and be like, Tua may not be coming back for a couple weeks. You may have to live with a couple mediocre weeks, but I think the payoff for that could be huge.
Yeah, I think the Dolphins are an easy one, like Tyreek Hill as well, just because.
If you could get Tyreek Hill, I would too.
There's a team, Pat, in our league, there's a team that's 0-6 with Tyreek Hill, and it's like, even if they only miss one more week, you might want to, see if they are trying to win now and make a move like that if Tyreek Hill is on a losing roster, which he probably is by virtue of they've had Tyreek Hill for the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Cameron with $4.99 said Ayuk or Juju. Oh, God, man. Brutal. Let's see. Well, long term, it's Ayuk, like for the rest of the season. But if we're just talking,
they're playing each other
week,
too. But the Chiefs have been really good against the run. They've been more so of a good run defense than a passing defense. I feel like Ayuk, because like I said, I feel like the Juju floor is literally no targets, as opposed to the Ayuk floor, which at least would be like a handful of targets.
I don't know. Are the floors that different? Like Ayuk had
I mean, we've seen
think
Juju
Ayuk-
just get completely outcasted on this team before. I mean,
Yeah,
I
but
could be
they don't-
completely
they
wrong.
don't
I think
have
I'm
anybody
scared
anymore. They don't have anybody anymore. Like
Justin
are
Watson
Are we going to
disagrees,
see? Are we going to? He's a blocker. He's a lineman. Like Ayuk had 4 targets this past week against the Seahawks. Juju, I don't see a world where we see like a full game of Sky Moore and Mecole Hardman playing
Or
over him.
just
There's
a full game of
there's just
Kareem
no
Hunt and
way.
Travis Kelce, though.
I mean, that's fair, but like Juju's going to be on the field. I think he's going to see enough. I don't think that's easy. I might go Juju. I really might. I think I'd go Juju in a PPR
I think I've got
league at
both of
least.
them on the same team. Am I starting either of them? Yeah, let's see.
Cameron with another $4.99 said Xavier. I believe this is pronounced Leggett, by the way. We've been pronouncing it Leggett, which is just the name of a teacher we had.
Fuck.
I think it's Leggett. But Xavier Leggett or Leggett, I'm not sure, or Christian Kirk. I think probably Xavier. I'm going to call him by his first name. for right
yeah,
now, but I think it's
the
Xavier.
big
He's
X.
the answer.
I think
Yeah.
so because we saw Christian Watson. What the fuck? Christian Kirk have a decent floor, like a good target share, and Evan Engram just zapped him of that.
Yeah.
And I think the opposite was what people were worried about in terms of Evan Engram was that Christian Kirk was going to take away from him. It seems like it's the other way around. And obviously, Leggett obviously had the tough game 2 weeks ago, and the touchdown really saved him this past week. But you still got to think that offense is trending in a better direction with Andy Dalton. So I'll go Leggett, but I feel like you're in a similar ballpark.
Yeah, I think I'd go with Leggett as well. And then, Pat, I'll put this one up on the screen for you. James King with $4.99 said 10-man standard league. Cup, McBride, and 49ers D for Kittle, Braylon Allen,
Yes.
and Jets D. Do I do this trade?
Are you getting the Cup side?
Whoever's getting the Cup side wins for
I agree.
sure. Like, not even
I
close.
agree. Like, so basically comparing McBride to Kittle, like I think that's very close. Like, say
Same difference.
Get rid of that. Defenses. I'm a big
get rid
believer
of
in a streamer. So you're basically comparing Cooper Kupp and Braylon Allen. If you're getting that deal, do it right now. Do it right now.
That's not even particularly close. That's an easy one. All right, now we'll get to some of the questions from the general chat. Let's see here. Possible trade: Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker for Baker Mayfield and Tyreek Hill. I'm on the Seahawks side. Okay.
I prefer the Baker and Tyreek side.
I do too. I mean, I think it's positional need.
Well, that's that
because
too.
it is a star running back for a star receiver. Again, we're expecting that we're only going to be going one more week without Tua playing with Tyreek Hill, but that's not a full certainty. So
true.
it adds a little bit of a wrench into this. I think I would still prefer the Baker Tyreek side, just because Baker, again, he's been QB. I actually looked it up, QB2 now to this point this year, which is insane. And then
Kenneth
him with a
Walker's looked
receiver.
great.
Kenneth Walker has looked great, which is why it makes this not a no-brainer. But give me the Baker and Tyreek side by just a little bit. Bo Nix or Drake May this week? Drake May. Jaguars defense. I don't think it's close.
Yes, I agree. And even then, but we've seen Bo Nix look like Will Levis out there a few times. Granted, we've seen some good things from him.
I gotta give Bo Nix some credit. He's been fantasy useful in half his games. The problem is the other half have been dreadful.
Well, I think that's what people kind of expected because he's this big gunslinger kind of guy where he could get you a huge play or he could get you nothing. Where that one game against the Jets where like I think he ran backwards on a few plays like.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at his points have been, I'll just take off the decimals, but 11, 8, 19, 6, and then the last 2 weeks, 23 and 20. So maybe he's turning a corner. Who knows? But I'm still going with Drake May against just an abysmal defense. Should I drop Fields for Rodgers? Yes. Fields is probably trending toward being a backup.
Unfortunately.
And Rodgers just got a major upgrade in weapon. I think he'll be at least startable for most weeks now with Davante.
Yeah, on the low end of QB1s, but yeah.
Yeah. Let's see here. Outdoors Brothers, you are asking that question far too often, and therefore you are going in timeout. I'm sorry. But if you're going to ask a question, just ask it once. That's all I got to say. Okay. Let's see here. I don't know what this even says. 12-man league. I got Purdy, Derrick Henry, J.K. Dobbins, Josh Jacobs, Chris Godwin, A.J. Brown, and I had Rashee rate this team. Let's see. Is that a championship team, Pat? I think that's a championship team. I think that's pretty good.
Oh my god, that team's disgusting.
That's pretty good.
You got Josh Jacobs as your third running back. Godwin,
the
ground
crazy
ceiling
thing
has
is-
been great.
The crazy thing is, this is like like this is a very draftable or trade forable.
Because you
team.
look at it.
This isn't unreasonable.
Say you have a late first round, you get Brown and Henry at that turn. You could easily have gotten Jacobs at like the third, Rice in the fourth or fifth, Godwin in the sixth. Dobbins was going in like eighth, ninth. Purdy was going for
I think you're
free,
probably
basically
getting Godwin in the fourth and then Rashi later. Because remember, Rashi wasn't adjusted in his ADP until very, very late.
That's true.
Where he became a fourth rounder.
That's true. Yeah, this team without Rashi, I mean, and you haven't even gotten the best out of AJ Brown yet. I'm curious what your record is. Letter C.
Yeah.
Drafted Brown first, Henry second. Nice.
Yeah, quarterback's the only slight deficiency, but like Purdy's fine with that team. Purdy's fine. Let's see.
Purdy's been pretty good.
Yeah. Should I pick up Demario Douglas? I have Nico, but he's on IR. I mean, I don't see necessarily how those two things relate. I understand you need a receiver because you lost Nico,
yes.
but yeah, I mean, we talked about Demario Douglas.
option.
I love him as a PPR option and as just a replacement sort of wide receiver. Let's see. Who should I start in the flex? Bijan Robinson, Brian Robinson, or Chuba Hubbard? My man, champagne problems over here. God damn.
We didn't talk about Bijan, but man, that offense looked really good, and we've got to fucking hope.
Panthers.
Oh yeah,
Panthers.
That's right.
That's all. I'm
That's
just
why
curious.
That's
I'm
true.
like, what is Bijan gonna do in games where they can't just run it all over everybody? So that's
That's
all.
fair.
But, yeah,
That's
he
fair,
did look
but
good. He at
I'd
least
still
did
say
something.
Bijan. He's still my answer to this question. Even if Brian Robinson plays, that's still my answer.
Yeah, I think Bijan's the best and highest upside play out of all of them. Let's see. Get out on Pickens and MHJ or ride it out and hope for better days. Different players to me. I would get out on Pickens and ride it out with MHJ.
The only thing about Pickens, unfortunately, is I don't think you could get that much for him.
No.
Like, I was kind of looking at him thinking, like, what I would offer, like, for a guy like Pickens, and I'm like, not a whole lot. Like, you're getting, like, a bench piece for a bench piece there. But MHJ, I have MHJ, and, I'm trying to trade him. But, I'm fully intent on just riding it out. I mean, we've seen the really high highs and then some really low lows, and then this week, obviously. But that offense just hasn't been as consistent as we thought it might be after that really, really good week one.
Yeah, it's been a struggle. Let's see. Shark Attack says trade Evans for Achan. So this depends. This isn't necessarily what I would say is a buy low, but I understand if the Achan owner isn't accepting much less than this, because I don't think I would accept anything less than this.
Wandell Robinson sent it.
If you have wide receiver depth and you really need a running back, I would say yes, but I think Mike Evans is going to have some really nice days ahead. And again, if your record is good too, like Mike Evans' playoff schedule, brother, fantasy playoffs, or at least, the weeks leading up to it too. I'll go week 12 on. Giants, Panthers, Raiders,
Panthers twice.
Chargers, Cowboys, Panthers.
Oh, Lord.
Like, the Bucs
Chris Godwin's going to be on 100% of championship winning teams.
The Bucs might be like the league winning team to roster players from.
Obviously, context matters, and it's clear, you can obviously have a team with 4 really good wide receivers, and if you're like that and you're in the fucking shits at running back, then I don't think this is necessarily a bad deal. But if you're just straight up, no context, no, I wouldn't do that.
Yeah. Let's see. Start Baker Mayfield or Jalen Hurts this week? Who would have thought this was a question, huh? Do they play each other? No, they don't play each other. Sorry. Oh, Jalen Hurts plays the Giants. I'm starting Jalen Hurts.
Yeah, just on the matchup alone. But again, if you could trade one of these guys and get a piece somewhere else, it's tough to. Well, I'd say it's tough to trade quarterbacks in the past, but quarterback has been such a shithole this year that I think you could really get something for one of these guys. And I think honestly, the answer is whoever you could get more for.
Yeah, funny enough, the Ravens are actually technically worse against quarterbacks in fantasy this year. They are the 31st team against quarterbacks, largely weighted because they got destroyed by Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow to the tune of about 30 points each. Granted, they held Josh Allen to 7.38 and Patrick Mahomes to 14. So kind of tough to really gauge there, but I'm definitely going Jalen Hurts just for, rushing upside, the weapons and the defense that he's facing, the actual real life defense of the New York Giants, which is just I'd feel a lot better about starting Jalen Hurts.
Tynan's going to cuck me in this guillotine thing and pick Baker right before me. Whether he's listening or not, he's on auto pick. I know it's going to be Mayfield, and I'm just ready to be sad.
But I think that'll do it, Pat. I think those are some good questions we got through. Thank you guys again for tuning into the show. We'll be right back here next week, 7:30 Eastern Time, to answer some more questions and bring you all of the fantasy shenanigans from the upcoming week.
Fantasy
So guys,
shenanigans, yeah.
fan, blah, blah, blah. Thank you guys for watching. Once again, for Pat Gustafson, I'm Brandon Carney, and we'll see you guys next time.
Go Yankees.